I'm 76 years old, and most mornings now I sit at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that gets cold before I finish it, and I think about all the things I didn't understand when I was young enough to do something about them.
I'm not sick, I want to be clear about that, but I'm not naive either. At 76, you start doing the math. You start counting what's behind you instead of what's ahead. And the view from back here, it looks nothing like what I expected. I spent 40 years teaching 3rd grade in a small public school in rural Ohio. Room 14. The same room for 38 of those years. The floor had a crack running from the door to the 3rd row of desks that maintenance kept promising to fix. They never did. I used to tell my students that crack was the room's signature, that even buildings have stories. I retired in 2013. No parade, no monument. The school gave me a sheet cake and a card signed by the staff. And I drove home and sat in this same chair at this same table, and I thought, what did any of that matter? I want to tell you what I've figured out since then, because I think you need to hear it. In the fall of 1987, a boy named Marcus came into my classroom. He was 8 years old, small for his age. He wore the same green jacket almost every day, one of those thin nylon ones that's no good for Ohio winters. And he had this habit of sitting sideways in his chair, like he was always ready to leave. I found out later his home life was hard. That's the word I'll use, hard. His father wasn't around. His mother was doing her best with 2 jobs and 3 kids. Marcus came to school some mornings having eaten nothing since the day before. He wasn't a troublemaker. He was something quieter than that. And quieter is sometimes harder to reach. He was absent. Not from the room, he was there in the chair, but from himself. Like someone had turned his lights down low to save energy. Now, I wasn't doing anything heroic. I wasn't a character in a movie. I was just a tired teacher in a room with 22 8-year-olds, a broken heater that clicked all November, and a reading curriculum I'd already taught 17 times. But I noticed Marcus, not because I was special, because that was my job. Noticing was my job. One Thursday afternoon in October, I remember it was a Thursday because we always did creative writing on Thursdays. I asked the class to write about something they were good at, and every child picked up a pencil, except Marcus. He just sat there, sideways in that chair, looking at the wall. I walked over quietly. I didn't make a scene. I crouched down next to his desk. My knees were already complaining about that even back then. And I said, just between the two of us, Marcus, what do you do better than anyone else in your family? He thought about it for a long moment. Then he said, almost in a whisper, I remember things. Like, I remember everything. I said, then write that down. Write, I am a person who remembers. And then tell me one thing you remember. He picked up the pencil. That was it. That was the whole moment, 45 seconds maybe. I stood back up, my knees cracked loud enough that 2 kids giggled, and I moved on to help someone else. I forgot about it by Friday.
I want you to hold that thought while I tell you something. 22 years later, in 2009, I received a letter, handwritten, 3 pages both sides in careful, deliberate script.
The kind of handwriting that tells you the person wrote it slowly, on purpose. It was from Marcus. He was 30 years old. He had spent 8 years in the US Army, including 2 tours overseas. He was now studying history at a state university on the GI Bill. He was writing his first paper on the oral traditions of West African cultures, on memory as a form of preservation. And in that letter, he wrote something I have read so many times, the paper has gone soft at the folds. He wrote, "Mrs. Calloway, I don't know if you remember me, but in October of 1987, you crouched down next to my desk and told me that remembering things was a talent. I had never once in my life been told I had a talent. I have been living off that sentence ever since. I sat at this table and I cried for a long time. Not from happiness exactly, from something more complicated than that. From the weight of realizing that the most important thing I may have ever done, I did without knowing I was doing it. In 45 seconds, between a broken heater clicking and 22 pencils scratching paper."
Here's what I've been turning over ever since. We are sold a very specific story about what a meaningful life looks like. You know the story, work hard, climb higher, get the title, the salary, the recognition, build something big, leave a legacy. I know that story. I taught in a system that told the children that story too. That success was a ladder and the point was to get to the top of it. But listen to me close, because I've watched 7 decades of human lives from a very close distance. The ladder is not the point. The garden is the point. You don't build a garden for yourself. You build it because butterflies need somewhere to land, because your neighbour needs something beautiful to look at when her own life feels ugly. You build it because a child walking past on a hard morning might look up and for 3 seconds feel like the world contains something good. And you will never know which child. You will never know which 3 seconds. That is the whole mystery and the whole miracle of an ordinary life. I spent 40 years in room 14 thinking that my job was to teach children to read and write and carry numbers. And it was. But underneath that, underneath every lesson plan and every state standard and every standardised test, I resented with my whole heart I was doing something else entirely. I was telling 22 children every September for 40 years, you exist, I see you, you have something in you that is worth finding. Most of the time, I didn't even know I was saying it. Lord knows how many Marcus letters are still out there, letters never written. People who changed direction in a hallway, who chose to stay instead of leave, who picked up a pencil, and I'll never know their names. That used to make me sad. Now it just makes me feel like I was part of something much larger than myself, like a single thread that doesn't know what the whole tapestry looks like. So here is what I'm asking you to do, not tomorrow, today. Think of one person, just one, who said something to you that kept you going. A teacher, a neighbour, a stranger at a counter, your mother on a Tuesday you almost don't remember. Someone who, in 45 seconds or 5 minutes, reflected something back to you that you needed to see in yourself. They probably don't know they did it. They are probably sitting somewhere right now, like me, wondering if any of it mattered. You could tell them. If they're still here, you could write them a letter, a real one, on paper that they can fold and keep and read until it goes soft at the creases. You could show up at their door. You could make a phone call you've been putting off for 6 years. And if they're gone, you can carry them forward. you can be that person for someone else. You can notice the child sitting sideways in the chair. You can crouch down and ask the quiet question, stop chasing smoke. Stop waiting until you have the right title or the right platform or the right amount of money to start making a difference. The difference is already available to you. It is always available. It costs 45 seconds and the willingness to pay attention. My coffee is cold again. I don't mind it so much anymore. I think about room 14 sometimes. That crack in the floor, running from the door to the third row, the clicking heater, 22 small faces every September looking at me like I might have something they needed. I hope I gave them enough. I hope the moments I don't remember were still enough. And I hope that you understand what I've been trying to say today. Your life, the ordinary Tuesday version of your life, with the cold coffee and the cracked floor and the same routine you think amounts to nothing, is someone else's Marcus letter. Someone is going to fold it up. Someone is going to read it until the paper goes soft. You just won't know who. And somehow, after 76 years, I've made my peace with that. If someone changed your life in a small, ordinary moment, tell us about them in the comments. Say their name. Let the rest of us know they existed. Because that is how ordinary people change the world.